Did it notify you?
Yeah, very robotic.
Yes, recording in progress. Okay, now I gotta record this guy. Okay, hi.
Hello.
So I've got some questions for you from the students at the British School in the Netherlands, and they're
Alrighty.
very excited to hear from you and learn about your career, as well as some of the more personal things. So,
Sure.
just for the sake of the interview, would you state your name?
Yes, name is Nathaniel Lammons. Excited to be here.
And you go by Nate?
I go by Nate usually. Yep.
Yeah. And what sport do you play?
I play tennis professionally on the ATP tour.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So, very brief questions, and feel free to expand and say whatever you feel or want. Okay.
All right. You got it.
Um, they started with how do you handle the pre-game, pre-match nerves? And do you have any routines that have helped you in your career when dealing with those?
Yeah. I think the first thing is I think the it's something I thought maybe growing up and even as I got older, I thought that kind of nerves going into a match or a competition were a bad thing. And I thought that that showed I don't know or I always thought that the best players in the world didn't get nervous. And I think as I got older, I realized that the nerves are really, they show you care and it's a good thing. And I think my experience has been that I'm pretty much nervous before every single match. And obviously it doesn't like consume me necessarily, but until I do my warm up and really kind of until the match starts, I'm kind of always a little bit nervous. And I think until it gets to the point where I'm sort of trusting my preparation once the match actually starts, I'm feeling pretty nervous. And so the other part of that question with how I handle it beforehand, um, I feel like that's kind of the whole thing. And I can't really speak to other players necessarily, but in my case, I have a warm up routine of sorts, both on court and just to get the body moving. And it's definitely changed over the years, but I feel like that process of getting my body moving, getting everything loosened up, and then also actually hitting tennis balls, that actually helps me kind of eliminate those nerves to start the match. And I think I don't know at what point my perspective changed and it became, hey, you're going to be nervous. Like and it's not a bad thing. And it's just how do obviously it'd be great not to feel that way because it does kind of heighten your anxiety. Um, but in my case, I feel like anytime I feel that, and even when I feel it off court, when I can kind of get the body moving and start to get it focused on the task at hand as opposed to just sort of thinking about scenarios, that's what's helped me kind of calm them or focus them.
Yeah. So it's almost as if like you're working through the pressure.
A little bit, yeah. And I think there's any number of kind of sportsisms, that's not a word, but kind of cliche expressions that people have come up with, and one of them is I feel like Billie Jean King said it, and she said that pressure is a privilege. And I think it's definitely true. And the better you do, the better you respond in pressure situations, the more you get put in those situations and the higher the pressure becomes. And I think if you're in situations where you feel pressure, it's a good thing. It means you're being tested, but it also means you've probably done well enough or achieved enough to be in those situations to begin with. And I think when you look at it that way, you can sort of embrace the pressure in a way, embrace being uncomfortable, embrace the opportunity to show people what you're made of. And if the beauty of the tennis schedule is there's always another match, there's always another week, and if you come up short on the day, yeah, it sucks, and no one likes to lose, and no one likes to come up short, but if you do, it's real easy. You get to get back out there real quick.
Yeah. So even picking up when you don't have a win, that's
Hmm.
part of working through the pressure as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, how do you stay consistent with your diet and nutrition if you have any sort of diet and nutrition plan,
Yeah.
and any specific foods or food groups that are important to help an athlete to perform at their best level, and to the type of foods that make you feel the best on match or game
Right.
day?
I think it's a big question. There's a lot of information I suppose I could share there.
Yeah.
I think as far as things that an athlete needs, I think there's obvious ones. There's carbs for energy. There's protein kind of for sustained muscle health, and fueling. I think it was definitely in my case a bit of a trial and error process to find kind of what types of things I like to eat the day of matches. I don't know that I've found myself affected a ton by what I've eaten the night before. I think part of that is as a doubles player, especially now, I don't play 3 out of 5 set matches. So the majority of my matches go, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours for the most part. And so needing like a sustained store of energy, like the singles guys do, it hasn't really been my need. It's funny, I actually talked to one of the singles players in Australia this year. Funny enough, I played against him actually first round, but he's a good friend. And I asked him kind of what singles guys do to play these long matches because I never experienced that growing up. The longest singles match I would have played was probably 3 hours. And that was, a lot of things have to go a certain way to get it to 3 hours.
That's a
Whereas
lot.
you play a 3 out of 5 set and it can be 5 hours. So I was curious how you do that. And those guys, I mean, a lot of it is you're fueling on court. That's one thing is how you get the right type of energy on court. And a lot of these guys usually they have little snacks. They have these little gel pouches that have both energy and kind of some they have sort of a kick kind of effect, like some caffeine, but not really that sort of effect where it's like a sugar rush, I suppose.
Yeah. Big calorie,
So
quick
and
calorie.
yeah, quick calories. Because in theory, you don't want to eat anything heavy on the court, obviously.
Right.
Um, so I think for me in general, day of, I don't eat a lot of red meat. I mean, I'll have some chicken. I'll keep it pretty light, usually pre-match. Um, if it does get long, afterwards, I'd probably have a big heavy meal. And I guess I've been lucky in that I have kind of naturally always eaten and fairly balanced. Made sure, I haven't, when I was really young, I suppose I didn't care for some vegetables for sure, but since since high school or college, I think I've naturally been okay with salads and other types of vegetables and eating fairly healthy. And so I think that's kept me on the track of, you know, uh, or in a good way. I haven't really had to resort to an organized nutritional plan of any kind. I am noticing that as I'm getting older, that I'm needing for some of these longer matches, like in Australia this year, the 2 matches we played in Melbourne were longer. And I felt by the end of it, I was thinking, man, I really need, these gel pouches that I have are actually kind of keeping me going, which I don't know that I've felt in the past.
Yeah.
So I think, maybe I need to devote some more attention, I guess, to the diet. But I think for a singles player, for sure, when you're playing, and when I would have been younger, I guess when I still played singles, it is very important because the fuel it can leave you hanging, without energy, and it can also keep you bogged down and sort of stuck in cement, feeling kind of on the court. And I think everyone's a little different, a little bit of trial and error. My partner
Yeah.
loves steaks, so my partner eats steaks like any time of day, and somehow that works for him.
Yeah.
That would definitely not work for me. So everyone's a little different. But I
Well,
think kind of. Sorry, go ahead.
true or false, you've eaten a sandwich on the side.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm always snacking, I guess, on the court. Pretty much every changeover, I'm either taking a bite of a banana or a granola bar or some almonds or something. I've kind of always been a fast metabolizer, and so I feel like I get lightheaded if I don't kind of keep my body working on something. And I usually find that like a nibble of a banana here, there, a sandwich, or it sometimes it's comical. You're right. I got some random stuff over there, but um, yeah, just keeping a little bit going in, I find is kind of helps me kind of stay even out there from like a blood sugar standpoint, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to do anything when your blood sugar is low, much less something so
Exactly.
physical.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So what role does visualization play in your training routine?
So admittedly, this is something that doesn't come naturally to me, and I've been trying to make more and more of an effort to do it. Probably the last like 3, 4 years. And I some of it was inspired by some conversations with a sports psychologist, but it was something that I was told to do when I was young and just never really was disciplined enough, I guess, to work it into my routine. But now I try to do at least one 10-minute block a day of just mental reps of kind of every shot I'd want to be able to hit in a point in every kind of scenario I feel like I'll come up with, and I visualize perfect execution of all these scenarios for that length of time. I think ideally I would do two 10-minute sessions a day, and it's funny because it is sort of mentally tiring for me. It's not the same type of tiring, obviously, as an actual practice, but the amount of like in a way your body doesn't necessarily know the difference between if you can get very good at the visualization, your body doesn't necessarily know the difference between these reps that you're getting in your head and the reps that you get on court. And obviously you need both to be able to visualize it properly. Um, but because you're visualizing everything, you're visualizing the feeling, the look of it, all of it. And I think as I've gotten older, I've started to realize, and some of this too was when I've dealt with injuries or time off, the visualization helps me stay kind of sharp and stay kind of mentally locked in. And I think it's a tool that I've started to work on more and more. And I think it's something like I forget at some point it was whether it was a sports psych or another coach who said gave me a percentage of what part of the game is mental versus physical, and it was telling in that like the game is a lot mental. Every sport is a lot mental because there's a competitive side of it. You got emotion involved as well. And so if you don't practice the mental side of it at all, you're really kind of shortchanging your training and your ability to perform at the highest level. So I think I wish that at a younger age I would have listened maybe more to coaches and parents and everybody really around me that had would have been able to appreciate it. Similar to me now, whatever, I'm 31 now and I see the value in it. And I guarantee if I told myself the same thing when I was 16, I would have probably said, yeah, that makes sense, and then just not done it. But it does. I have found that it's been helpful for sure, and I wish that I was better about doing more of it. I have a calendar notification that goes off every day telling me to do it, and admittedly, some days I'm not great about doing it. It does take some time and it does take effort. It's like going to the gym. Once you're there, you're going to work out, but it's getting there. That's the trick.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
definitely is valuable.
Yeah, I mean, just like you just mentioned, being exhausted from the brain's work
Hmm.
as well. I mean, I think that's fascinating and interesting to hear your perspective on the exhaustion that can come up when you are doing just the visualization and not just the physical activity stuff. So I think that will be really interesting for the kids as well
Hmm.
to learn about from you. Um, how do you balance the competition and pressure of a tournament with the enjoyment of your sport?
It's tough sometimes, I guess is the easy answer. I think I've been lucky enough to play a game for the better part of my life now, and there's ebbs and flows of the enjoyment side of it for sure. And obviously everybody loves winning, and so when you win, obviously that feels amazing. Everyone can enjoy that. You do feel on the top of the world, but the tennis world's a funny one because when I do the best in a tournament, so if I win a tournament, I'm usually traveling either end of that day or the very beginning of the next day to go to the next tournament and try to do the same thing. So I don't get to really ride the high of a tournament win very often, if at all. Um, and some of my best stretches, yeah, okay, I've had consecutive tournaments won, but even then, you're immediately turning the page. And so I think if your enjoyment is purely based on winning, then it's going to be tough because that resets, and then the next day you're thinking about your next match. So
Right.
I think in my case, I found a lot of joy in being able to see different parts of the world. And so that's a luxury I have with the job, that it's taken me around the world. And my sister Leah here's a great example. I get to see her when I go to the Netherlands, which has been like 2 times a year, for the last couple of years, which is cool. I get to see a familiar American face uh halfway around the world, and
Familiar
stuff like that.
American face?
Familiar, somewhat familiar, used
You
to be
mean
really
your
familiar.
sister?
Yeah. Yeah, that's familiar of the family. Um, but yeah, being able to see other countries, other people, cool places, and admittedly, I don't get to do it a ton, but just the rare chances I get is something that's really kept me going from that side of things, enjoying it, and a lot of the times I can kind of get some enjoyment in retrospect, I guess, looking back on cool matches that I played or cool moments. In the moment on court, it's difficult because you're doing everything you can to win, and you don't have a bird's eye view of what you're doing at the time. And so, like I remember in Melbourne last year, we lost second or third round. I guess we lost a really good match, really close match on I think the second or third biggest court there. And they had moved us to that court because it was raining outside. They closed the roof and the place was packed. So it was a combination of all these factors that usually doesn't happen for a match for me. To have this many people watching, to be this close of a match, and it came down to the wire. We ended up losing. Our opponents played great at the end. Um, we played great the whole time. We just couldn't get across the line. That happens. And obviously, in the moment, I'm very upset with that. I wanted to get the win. And, I think, but it didn't take long. Probably by the end of the week, a couple of days later, I could look back and say, wow, that was really cool. We're getting to play in front of that many people and play at a high level and be part of that moment was super cool. And there's several moments like that at various tournaments. I could rattle off a few, and things like that. That keeps you going. It keeps you going for sure. And obviously, like I said, the winning's great. Yeah, getting some money is good. All of that is awesome. No one's going to turn any of that down. But in my case, being able to see the world, meet people around the world, and be part of some of these really cool moments and matches, that's really been the enjoying part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what is the best piece of advice you have received throughout your career in your sport?
I think the best advice. I mean, it is definitely it's not going to be a surprise probably to anybody, and that I'm sure everyone's heard it before. But I think if you can truly embrace it and take it to heart, it can take you a long way. And I think for me, it's basically like just keep improving. You could say trust the process or kind of whatever, however you want to phrase it. In my mind, it's helped me, or in my case, it's helped me develop from a junior tennis player who wasn't highly touted, and kind of keep growing in college, keep working after college, keep continue to improve. And that's helped me get to where I am now. But I also think it applies off court and in life as well. And constantly trying to improve and grow, I think, and learn is so crucial to life. And yes, I think it's helped me on the tennis court, but I also think it's helped me personally. And that's, I think that's in a way kind of the beauty of sport is it does teach you some really cool lessons, and teach you how to learn and kind of keep it teaches you how to fail as well. It teaches you how to fail and kind of get back up and keep going. But I think to me, all the coaches I've really had that have stayed with me long have kind of echoed that mentality to me. It's never really been about results. It's always been about kind of continuing to get better. And I think as long as you continue to get better or do the things that everything you can to get better, you're going to be kind of satisfied or in a way like sort of proud of yourself when you finish or even along the way because you notice when you're getting better and when you're improving and it's to me that's a really cool feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And so true. And what's the best advice your sister's ever given you?
Hmm. This is probably giving me some style advice at some point, but I think my sister has is always deep and heartfelt, I feel like, with her advice. And I think you know, I can't think of maybe necessarily any nuggets of advice in particular, but I feel like knowing that knowing that she's kind of always got my best interest in mind and wants me to be happy and find someone to be happy with me and surround myself with happy people, have a loving family and kind of find the good in everyone around me. I think
Mhm.
that's what I think of when I think of my sister and any of her advice that she might give me.
She sounds awesome.
Yeah, she's pretty cool.
Okay, so how do you handle pressure during match points or being behind in the game?
Um, I think a little bit of that is it's similar to the general pressure question from earlier. I think obviously when you're going through a match or you're playing any kind of sport, you feel sort of the waves of pressure as they go back and forth between teams or players. And obviously when you create opportunities, whether it's like a break point or match point, you do feel the weight of that moment. And it'd be great if in a perfect world you didn't know what the score was and you could just play in a vacuum. That would be ideal. It's not the reality though. It's I would say it's probably impossible unless you somehow can hypnotize yourself or just not listen to the score. I don't know. Um, but the to me, I when I do feel nerves in those moments, I think some of this too is part of the visualization that I do. Is kind of before every point that I play, I have a little kind of reminder that I tell myself, and it's different for each point setup. But I forget the term for it, but oh, audibles. That was what my sports site called them. Was they were called audibles, and basically it was like a one word reminder of okay, what is my focus for this point? This is my focus. And sometimes it's more like there's almost an explanation in my head of, okay, this is what I'm trying to do here. This is if I'm going to miss, this is where I'm going to miss all of those things. And but before each point, I can kind of hang my hat on this is my intention for this point, and I go out and I go for that. And having that kind of kind of recenter before every single point, whether it's match point or just love all is I think is huge for me. And you're still going to feel the nerves, like you're still going to, you're still going to want it. And that's why when you win a match point, when you win a break point, people yell because it's a,
Yeah.
it's a buildup of emotion and tension and you release it. And that's the same reason you yell when you don't get it. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think also in my case too, I've had a track record of having anger problems, I suppose, on court in my life. And I think something that's helped me is finding a way to, or finding an outlet for that built up energy and tension throughout the match. And in my case, I've found there's constructive and destructive ways to get rid of that energy. Yeah, you can smash a racket, you can yell at the ref, you can yell at people in the stands, you can do all these destructive things. Um, but there are constructive ones. In my case, and this is one that I do now, and I use it. I just yell, and usually it's not a word. Usually I just sort of just yell, like make a noise, and it takes a lot of energy to yell kind of full power. And I've found that that's really been a helpful outlet for me of kind of releasing this tension. And um, I think there's so many times that I've done a poor job of it, and I think kind of making that transition to this is something I can use as a tool for myself um, has been huge. And to be honest, I don't know that a lot of players need that. To me, it seems like a lot of players out on tour don't get nearly as kind of energized or tight in a way. I think everyone gets frustrated differently, and maybe some people actually probably could use to let it out more along the way, and it would help their performance. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as like dealing with those specific moments, I think if you can do a good job kind of the whole way, whether it's, kind of having a good focus on the points before or, and kind of having a game plan, a miniature game plan for each
Yeah.
point allows you to feel prepared. And if you do a good job of kind of releasing energy along the way, then you'll still have some built up, obviously, but you won't have it sort of bottling up over to where you won't be able to perform. um, and the reality is too with tennis is there's a lot of variables that you can't control, and you have an opponent who they can play really well, they can come up with something, they can get lucky, you can get lucky. Those things are out of your control. So if you can focus on your intention and what you can personally control, you kind of learn to be okay with what comes of it, what the result is. And it's similar knowing there's another match next week. There's maybe another point. You lose a match point of one of yours. There's every chance you could create another one. So you got to be able to see it that way. And I think in certain moments, like if let's say I get to the finals of a Grand Slam, if I have a match point and I end up losing that match, there's no guarantee I'm going to be back in the finals of a slam but I think if you dwell on it like that, I would say it's going to be a lot harder to get to the finals again.
Yeah.
So I think the trick is a combination of all of those things, kind of release the energy, kind of have good focus before each point, and then also know that you're going to get other opportunities, whether it's this week or next year, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that's solid. Um, yeah, okay. So what strategies do you use to remain motivated for long periods of time?
It's also tough at times. So the tennis season is long, and it's basically 10 to 11 months of the year, and there's a lot of consecutive weeks at times. And yeah, the schedule is flexible, so you can decide when to play in ways. And I think that's part of it is deciding when to play and kind of listening to your own motivation levels. In my case, I've been able to be very nomadic for my entire career so far, and some of that is I've been able to find the joy that I spoke to in a previous question. Been
Yeah.
able to find that on the road, and I think being able to do that has helped me kind of keep the motivation strong. And that combined with okay, I feel like I'm working towards something. I'm always working to get better. And so the day to day of training and travel, but with I can kind of mitigate a little bit of the dangers of kind of getting burnt out mentally.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't always work, and there's going to be stretches of the year where I struggle. Every year there's and a lot of the times it's when I have a couple weeks that don't go well tournament wise, and those weeks feel really long because the time in between matches is longer, and you don't get to do your whole match day routine. You wake up, you warm up, you play. Okay, we win. Now I do like my cool down. Now I go to sleep, wake up, do it again, or I have a day off, and then it's the next day I play. And so when you're in that cycle of playing a lot of matches, it's easy. It's really easy to kind of go week to week because you're immediately focused on the next competition. But those weeks that feel really long, that is the struggle. To me, that's the biggest rub of being on tour, and that's why you see people stop playing or not make it, because they don't know how to handle being away from home for a long time, or being away from family and having tough weeks. Um, and so in my case, I think I've been blessed and lucky that I've had kind of friends in multiple cities, and that's helped too, because then I can, I mentioned coming to the Netherlands. So when I go to Hertogenbosch in June, yeah, late June maybe, um, that was in the middle of like a 15-week stint for me, and being able to see family sort of resets the clock for me.
Oh,
And so there's several places throughout the calendar where I have the ability to kind of reset the clock and see whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's coaches, and that's the what's really worked for me. Most people, I would say, most players have had like a normal living situation, a home or a family that they live with, and can either bring their family with them some of the weeks, and that helps kind of keep their running clock low, or they can get home and sort of decompress. And so this year is kind of the first year that I have that ability to kind of get home and decompress for any length of time. And so I'm kind of looking forward to enjoying that throughout the year, seeing what sort of mental headspace that puts me in. But it's a little different for everyone, and I would say that to me that's the biggest challenge of being on tour is the week after week travel, and kind of staying mentally fresh during that.
yeah. And long flights and short flights and all the airport that
Everything, yep,
that can wear on
yep,
you.
definitely.
Um, and being around people.
Yeah, people are the worst.
Don't I know it? Okay, so just a few more questions. How important has analyzing your opponent's game been in your career?
I
Or does
think,
your
no,
coach
go
do
ahead.
that? Oh,
Yeah, so in my case, a little of both. I would say mostly been myself, or my partner, whoever the partner was at the time. A little bit of the coach for sure. I think a lot of times I use coaching resources more on my own side of the net, than the other, because it does take some time and to scout an opponent. But when it's somebody familiar, there can be a conversation between me and any coaching about, how would they played me against, or how they played against me last time, what worked, what didn't. Um, and I think it's helpful because I think it helps me focus a lot of times externally on what's happening away from me on the other side of the net, and that helps me from getting too frustrated with what's any sort of misses I have. And so yeah, there's always a strategic element. You want to be familiar with mostly what, or as much as you can, what guys are going to throw your way. And to me, I use it as almost as a visualization component is, okay, how do they swing? How does the ball come in off their racket? Yes, I do see tendencies where they like to serve, what types of shots are their favorite, things like that. But a lot of it is I don't want to step on court and the first time that be the first time I'm seeing the way that they hit the ball. I like to have seen it before, even if it's, just a recording, even if it's just a few minutes. Um, Being able to see their strokes, and I think that helps me be prepared for the timing of things. It helps me be prepared, from a strategy standpoint, what they're going to throw my way. And I think there's always room to do more of that for sure. I think it is difficult though. I think the resources that I have at hand for watching other people's matches are somewhat limited. Having to skip through point by point can get tedious. But I feel like I've always done a pretty good job of watching my opponents play at least a little bit the day before or a couple days before I play them.
yeah,
I think that for me, that's huge. I know my partner, for him, it's better. He prefers to not think about it so much and really and I can totally appreciate it in his case. The way he plays his best is he knows, hey, if I execute my side of things, the opponent's kind of not going to it won't matter as much what they're doing. And to a certain extent, I think that that's true. There's definitely kind of shades of gray in between. You want to be able to take care of your stuff and also anticipate in some way what your opponents are going to do.
yeah,
um, but ultimately too, your opponents can adapt and change what they do on the day. So putting
Yeah.
too much stock in what they did the last time you played them or their last few matches is also dangerous because they can adjust based on you. And so it's a little bit of both. You got to be in tune with what's happening on the day, but I think familiarizing yourself with your opponent is always good. Always
Yeah.
good. Knowledge is power type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, what is your best advice to prevent injury?
Hmm. I think I mean, for sure stretching, I think that's especially when you're younger, I think that's it's hard to do. It's similar to the visualization. It's like you don't maybe feel the need for it when you're young, and you it's very hard to get hurt when you're young, especially playing a sport like tennis. Um, Tennis injuries tend to be repetitive use injuries that just develop later in life, when you're old like me, and things like that start creeping up. And they creep up when you're younger too, but I think it takes a lot of time, and you don't see the value in sort of the stretching and the prehab type things. And some of that too, I think, you know, growing up, I think I didn't maybe either I didn't resort to the right resources or I wasn't, put in front of the right people to know and explore kind of your everyone's different. Everyone's bodies are different. And so everyone has different imbalances and strengths and weaknesses. And that applies to specific parts of your body as well as just in general. And I think had I maybe had a better idea of, let's say in college, so whatever, 10 years ago, if I had a good idea of, okay, this is kind of my personal physiology, this is how my personal body works. Okay, over the course of the rest of my life, I know that I'm going to have this natural sort of imbalance. Things are going to pull one way or the other, and that can over time lead to issues. But obviously, if I stay on it, I can kind of work around it, strengthen things, keep things flexible. I don't know that that would have necessarily changed any experiences that I have now or in the future, but I think that's huge. I think that you see a lot of injuries and a lot of things in people's careers because they either didn't take care of things. There's always a degree of luck involved in it too. Like you could be the best and take care of your body, you know, in the perfect way and still get injured. But I think any sort of stretching that you can do growing up, I think is huge. Because your body does listen, it does learn, it knows how to react to things like that. Obviously, a fitness regimen is huge too. Building up the strength is crucial. Um, in my case, that was kind of pivotal to me getting better at tennis was getting a lot stronger. And some of that is for tennis. I'm a shorter guy, and so I needed to balance being less able, let's say, to have long levers and just kind of naturally flow to, okay, I have to be very explosive and I have to be very strong and I have to be very fast because I am shorter. So and everyone's different. If you're taller, you don't have to focus more on that, and you're focusing instead on how do I move fluidly? How do I use my levers to my advantage? And how do I cover space in a comfortable way and keep my balance? And so things are, your priorities shift based on your body, whether it's a stature thing or a just balance in general with muscles and everything. And when you're young, you don't appreciate the subtleties to that. But I think it is interesting. Tennis is an interesting one because you see, and you can see it when you look at, let's say, any of the singles guys. Let's take them because they're the most visible, and you compare their bodies. The fact that you have, okay, so you have, I would argue that like a Zverev and a Sinner, Medvedev, they all have this very tall, slender build to them. Great movers, very fluid. At the same time, you have an Alcaraz, you have like a Rafa type body, you have other guys right now. So like if you guys are in tune with Dutch players, you have like a Greek Spore who like those guys are relatively short and muscular, very strong, and you compare that to the tall, basically giants, very skinny giants that have a ton of power and move very well. It's interesting. It's an interesting sport because you have those two guys competing against each other.
Yeah.
Whereas in other sports, you have sort of similar builds competing against each other. basketball, everyone's tall and long. And in football, in American football, you have kind of similar builds. Like the running back is maybe the exception, but the receiver is competing against a defender who's kind of the same build as him. The linemen, they're competing against each other. I think tennis is a unique one in that you get these like different bodies competing against each other, and you have to learn how things are going to work in order to kind of keep operating with what works for your body. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a long-winded answer, but
No,
kind of
that's
got going.
fascinating.
Yeah,
And you actually answered like two questions in one, so it's
perfect.
great.
Nice.
Um, but just to follow up on that stretching part,
Yeah, yeah, okay.
how do you feel about yoga, and when did you start making yoga more of an important thing for you, or the
Yeah,
stretching?
so yeah, yeah. Yeah. So my sister introduced me to yoga properly. Gosh, I don't know when that was. It would have been
You were still in
when you
college.
lived in Dallas, right? Yeah, I mean, it would have been probably 10 years ago, roughly. I mean, give or take a year or so. And I think to me the yoga teaches more than just stretching as well because you learn there's a lot of balance element in it. I think as someone who's worked out a lot in the gym, I think yoga was huge for me because I think it helped balance out, sort of the strength component of yes, I can move weight, but hey, there's a core element to it. Maybe that's more what I'm shooting for is there's a core and there's a balance, and that's part of the process of keeping your body just generally sort of working right and balanced in general, especially for a sport where you're there's a heavy movement component and it uses your whole body. And so I think yoga is the balance stretching and it uses your whole body to do it. And obviously there's different forms. There's a lot of different, probably goals that a yoga, practice can have for you. But in my case, I think it was huge for core development, huge for flexibility, and I think huge for kind of strength in different positions that end up coming into play while you're playing because there's positions where you're sort of lunging and you're having to use your strength, and that's, I mean, the amount of times that I'm in a lunge while I'm playing tennis is quite a bit. And
Yeah.
so kind of building these sort of connective muscles from a strength but a flexibility standpoint as well. I mean, it's huge. That's the only way. That's the name of the game, really. And there's different ways to do it for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I think you need both. You need the flexibility and you also need the strength and balance and
Mhm.
being able to combine those. And also depending how you practice it as well, there's definitely a mental aspect to it. And I think we've already spoken to the mental aspect of tennis, and really any sport. And so I think if you can quiet your mind, work on some balance, work on some strength, work on some flexibility, those, all of those are huge assets to anybody as a person, but also, I mean, an athlete that's huge. That's three or four areas that are so pivotal to the game.
Yeah, I definitely think it's more mainstream now as well for professional athletes
Hmm.
in all sports that they are choosing yoga as part of the regimen, and that
Yeah,
is so that they slow down the wear and tear on the body
yeah.
by nurturing those stretches. And then the breath work and the mental aspect that
Oh, the
you're.
breath work. The breath work is huge as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. The breath work. I didn't think about that component, but I think to me that's actually something that I've worked into my visualization as well. Like
Mhm.
the breath work is very underrated, for sure. Not something I realized growing up either, how crucial that can be.
Yeah, I mean, me either. And I think that's what we're finding out these days is how
Yeah.
important that breath work is.
Hmm.
One of the things that you had brought up before a little bit was about the psychologist, the sports psychologist that you've seen and
Hmm.
that you speak to. And their question for you was how often do you speak with them? And obviously you've already gone into detail about how important the mental game is and your
Hmm.
status when you're playing. Um, but all of that together, yeah, like how often do you see them? And
Yeah. So, in my case, I don't talk to her regularly anymore. So I think different from, and granted, I can imagine anyone would do it differently than everyone's needs are different. But I think sports psychology is all obviously different in a lot of ways from like a clinical psychologist in a way. And so, yes, there are call them chronic um, issues or chronic shortcomings that you're working through. But my experience with Alexis is her name was she taught me some tools and some mindset. And so I saw her regularly, probably for a couple months for sure. And then I would talk to her probably every few months after that, kind of one-off things, if something particular kind of popped up that I wanted to chat about. And I think the early sessions really taught me some tools that I've used a lot, whether it's the visualization, um, whether it's different phrasing, things I can use to work through kind of different kind of mental roadblocks that I've had before on court. And I've definitely had some regular check-ins with her where new things have popped up, and some of those are issues on court. Some of them are issues with just the life of an athlete in general. And I think talking with her was huge, and knowing that she's still a resource that I can go back to, and she knows enough of my history for sure to kind of help me through my things. And she's also kind of she's a supporter of mine. She'll text me here and there when we do well, and you can tell that she's rooting for me. And I think having another person in your corner is huge as well. Um, so I think in my case with her, yeah, I sort of had a lot of foundational column sessions with her, probably, I don't know, 5 to 10, somewhere in there. And then kind of since then, I've probably had another sort of half dozen kind of not so much check-ins, but it was, hey, there's something I want to maybe flesh out, whatever it is,
yeah,
get your input. And I think to me in that case, that sort of setup has been really good, because I think if we had sort of regular check-ins all the time, I feel like I'd almost be coming up with things as opposed
yeah,
to like, hey, this is a problem, let me fix this problem.
yeah,
Very professional, I feel like is how I feel like that sort of sprouts up, is um and I think she's been very pivotal for me, and I think it's really shown me the importance of the mental side of the game, and helped me kind of find the ways that I want to train that side of it. Probably gonna have to hang up and do my visualization now. We keep talking about it. I need to get on it.
yeah. I know this is much longer than I thought it was going to be, but it's been great and fascinating.
Mhm.
I only have a couple more left, and
Alrighty.
this one can be quick. It was, what made you choose to progress in tennis? Did you excel in any other sports? So we know the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was younger, I guess I played baseball and soccer when I was real young. I played baseball the longest, I want to say, until I got to high school. I think the way I remember it, at least, was I remember being really small um, at that age, and I felt like I really liked baseball, but I just felt like at some point I was unable to compete at the same level that I was before. And I think when you're young and you don't necessarily know how big you're going to be either. And both my parents are pretty small as well. And so probably saw that and was like, hey, maybe I don't have that much more in me, and it's tough as a kid to be sort of disadvantaged so much, just because you're smaller. And in a sport like baseball, where there's not like a weight class or anything like that to sort of put me in a like sized category. I think
Mhm.
it was hard, but at the similar time, I was starting tennis, or I'd started tennis maybe a couple years before, and I felt like I was at least still very competitive at that, even at a young age. Um, And so I remember it was in that kind of like 12, around 12 years old, where I started to notice a distinct difference between how competitive I was able to be in tennis versus in baseball. And so that definitely pushed me that way. I think it's hard when you're young to lose for sure. It's hard when you're old as well, but I think that definitely pushed me in a tennis focused uh, sporting, I guess, hobby wise. As far as now and after school, I think, I played through high school and through college, not really with the intention of playing post school. And I guess was blessed enough to have put some of the right pieces together, training wise and coaching wise along the way. And I was good kind of right at the end of my university career. And I opted to play a little tennis instead of get a job as an engineer. And yeah, still continue to surprise myself today. So probably the right choice, I guess, to ditch baseball back in the day.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so.
but
Even though you're being modest, you were very good. So, but tennis was the winner.
yeah, yeah.
Um, oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Um, yeah. Do you have any game day rituals like the same breakfast on the day of a match?
Um, Not in particular. Not in particular. I think usually what happens is on the week, I end up having the same breakfast every day. So I wouldn't say it's the same week to week, but and some of that is as you travel around the world, not the same food's not always available, and definitely not in the same form.
Yeah.
So usually I'll within the first day or two, I'll figure out my breakfast kind of for that week, and I'll just sort of have that same thing. Creature of habit, I suppose. Um, I would say there are some things I like to do. I really like coffee, and so the way that I consume coffee before matches, sometimes I get in a little routine of that, of like when I want to have it to be able to have like a little burst of energy or just kind of relaxing if I want to have just kind of a sip coffee and chill. So I've gone through stretches where I've had a very particular routine with that. Um, but I wouldn't say I'm too particular. I think there has been moments I think early on in my career where I was sort of superstitious in a way where I was like, okay, this is something I'm doing because I've won my last match with it.
Yeah.
Um, but in my case, that went as far as my next loss type of thing. So at this point, I feel like I've won and lost doing anything that I would have been superstitious about. So
Yeah.
that kind of powered through any sort of like real neuroses that I could have had with it.
Yeah. I mean, it would be tough to do the same something or another every single day when you have no real control over what food you're being offered
Yeah,
either on the tournament.
yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
I mean, I don't know how demanding you players can be, but it sounds like you have to
Some of
be
us can be.
some of them, I'm sure,
Yeah.
but not you. You're
No, no, absolutely not.
reasonable.
Absolutely.
Okay, last question. What do you do for fun away from tennis?
So I like to golf. That's the first one. Obviously that's weather dependent, and it takes a lot of time. It's a time killing hobby. So, having access to that, both nice weather and the time, and also a nearby golf course. Sometimes that's not possible, all of those things combined, but I was lucky in Australia. I was able to play a couple times before coming home, which was great. Able to play here when the weather's warm enough. Throughout the summer in Europe, I'm able to play in a few places, which is great. Besides golf, I do like to work out, which I guess is also constructive for my job. But um, I'm doing more and more reading, which is nice. I feel like it's a brain exercise as well as like a brain escape, if that makes sense. It's sharpening my brain. It also allows me to set my phone down for a little while. I think seems like more and more nowadays, everyone spends on their phones, myself included. And I think both golf and reading, I feel like are ways for me to set it down, at least for, a few minutes here and there, which isn't a huge win, but it's something. And I think I'd love to be able to tune out the phone more than I do. But I've used reading really as a tool for that. Other things, when I'm on the road, sometimes I play Fortnite, funny enough, with some friends back home. And I'm terrible. I'm really bad at the game, but it's sort of it's a way I can chat with friends, and keeps me kind of in touch with them. And I think that's part of kind of keeping me refreshed and centered on the road. And I'm sure they're tired of carrying me in these games probably, but I like to. It's still cool to chat with them here and there, and I think that's how you keep friends, doing little things like that, and especially for me when I'm not able to see them that often.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think on the road, those are the main hobbies for sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's TV time and whatever else, but I think those are the consistent ones that I try to work in.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your
Of course,
time and
of
your
course.
knowledge. And yeah, is there anything else you want to share with the British School of the Netherlands athletes?
I mean, just keep improving. It's that same advice that I feel like I embrace on and off the court. I think if you guys can learn to do the same, I think you'll grow as humans and as athletes, and ultimately that's what we want to do. Probably right now you're more focused on the athlete bit, but you'll learn to appreciate it, I guess, later on. But I mean, these were all great questions. It tells me you guys are, you're looking at things the right ways and trying to learn, and that's part of it too. That's part of the keep improving mindset. So yeah, keep up the good work.
Yeah. Awesome. Well.